Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaacson-Hurst.
Hi guys, Saul here, back again. Today we've got a fantastic guest. I'm really excited. It's Rasmus Ankersen, who's currently the Director of Football at Brentford FC in London in the Championship, and he's also Chairman of Midtjylland in Denmark. He's maybe more famously known for his work with Moneyball, if you like, although I know they don't like that term, but using statistics to their advantage, using different ways to try and get ahead of the opposition, maybe with the opposition having more money than they have, so using inventive ways to try and give themselves an advantage. He's got lots of fantastic knowledge to share. I was really interested in this one. This is definitely one of my favourites because it does come from not just the coaching perspective. He talks about all aspects of working at a club. Also talks about academy football as well in Midtjylland and Brentford, and obviously the controversy around the Brentford Academy as well. So it's a really interesting one. I know you're going to enjoy it. It's a really good one. From my point of view. So good to be back in the country now for a good few weeks. We've got lots of quality podcasts coming up. Some really great guests. I'm really privileged. All these people agreeing to come on the show. So please stay tuned. In terms of what's happening with the site, we've got the Coaches Pass aimed at coaches. So Ryan Hall, we're really privileged to have him aboard. He used to work at Tottenham in the academy, pre-academy coordinator, academy head coach, and Ryan and myself trying to get lots of quality content out there for you guys, ball mastery and 1v1 specific, and we've got lots of guests as well giving some of their sessions. The dynamic ball mastery program, the online homework training, also going strong in 20 countries, and also working with several clubs around the world. If you're interested in being a partner club and giving your players that top quality homework online technical program, just give us a bell, get in touch, and we can help sort that out. But without further ado, hope you enjoy the show. So Rasmus Ankersen, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
So can you just give us a brief bit of background about your playing, coaching and your career in football up to this point?
Well, I started out in Denmark with a dream of becoming a professional footballer, but unfortunately I got an injury first senior game when I was 19 after 15 minutes, and that brought me out of the game for a long time. So then I became one of these frustrated, injured players with unreleased ambitions that then became a coach, and I started my coaching career as an under-19 coach at FC Midtjylland, where I'm the chairman today. And then after a few years, I went out of football. I felt that there was a lot to be learned from other industries, from business. So I became an entrepreneur and built a few companies and wrote a few books. And then so 4 years ago I came back into football again in a more senior management role.
And so what is that? Just tell all the listeners what your current role is.
Yeah, so I'm the chairman of my childhood club, FC Midtjylland, and then I am the co-director of football at Brentford in West London, and both clubs are owned by the same guy, Matthew Benham. So that's where I spent the majority of my time today.
And so can you just tell us then a little bit about that, from making your transition from player to coach at Midtjylland?
Well, yeah, I was never as a player. I was never super talented. I mean, I was not very natural gifted, so I had to think a lot about how I could improve. I think that's a good starting point for becoming a coach. Is if you've been too good too early, then you don't really need to reflect and to think about how you can improve. So I thought a lot about especially the mental side of the game and how I could improve that, and I think that when I then got injured, it was kind of obvious to me that I wanted to do something from the coaching side. So I did a big project on mental training. I called it the mental muscle at the time, which was based on me going around to different top world-class athletes in different sports, interviewing them, and based on my findings, then I put together a program that I taught at the Midtjylland Academy. So yeah, I think it was a natural transition for me, and probably because in my playing career I had to because of my lack of talent, I had to think a lot about how things worked and how I could improve.
So how did you make that progression from young coach to chairman of the club?
Well, it was really, one of those serendipity moments. Was the train you don't catch that change your life, right? It's I was an entrepreneur in Denmark. I published books. I wrote books on leadership, on management, and I wrote this book called The Gold Mine Effect, which was me traveling around the world for 6 months to live and train in small environments that produce a disproportionate amount of top talent. So like the best middle distance runners in the world come from the same village in Ethiopia. The best sprinters in the world come from the same athletic club in Kingston, Jamaica. So I found 6 places and I traveled around for 6 months. I published the book in Denmark and I wanted to see if I could have global impact with the book. So I was moving to London to find a publisher, which I did, and the book was published in the UK. And then some years back, I gave a talk about the book at a birthday party in Copenhagen, and at that event there was a woman in the audience who had a cousin that knew Matthew Benham, who owned Brentford, and those two women they were together, and they ended up speaking about this. One woman had heard me speak, and I spoke about recruitment, I think, and the other woman said, well, I know this guy from London, he thinks very different about football and he's got some challenges recruitment. Why don't we bring these two guys together? So that is what happened, and then I ended up meeting Matthew Benham, and I did some consulting work for him for a while, and then one day we had a lunch in Soho, I remember, and he said to me he wanted to own another football club, and he had some quite radical ideas about how things could be done different in football, and he wanted to test that. So I said, why don't you take a look at my childhood club, which was Midtjylland, based in the middle of nowhere in Western Denmark, and Midtjylland was almost bankrupt at the time. So I think that's a good starting point for change, right? If you're bankrupt, you're open to change. So we went there, had a look at the club, and then eventually he bought the club and made me the chairman. So when that happened, I sent a message to that woman who introduced them and said, well, this is actually one of the introductions that actually turned out to create something. So thanks for that. So so it was. I think I always felt I wanted to come back into football. Even when I was out of football for 10 years, being an entrepreneur, but I also wanted to come back with a different baggage of experience from business, which I felt that could be brought back into football.
Fantastic. So, it's quite an interesting story, an inspiring one as well. So, the club you talk about was close to bankruptcy, but you then went to winning the league in one season. Is that right?
Yeah, the club was. I knew there was a lot of good people in the club. There was a really strong tradition for talent development. It's a really unique talent environment. I think one of the best academies in Europe. And the last few years, the under-19 team has beaten this year Anderlecht, the Belgian champion, Malaga, the Spanish champion, and Atletico Madrid last season in the Youth Champions League. And it's kind of unique and spectacular because this club is based in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of people living there. So I knew there was a really good foundation. So I felt that it would be a good investment for Matthew. It was a club that had spent, because they were running out of money, and they had to play the young players, and they got a lot of experience, those players, because they played regularly for 2 years. So I felt, well, if you go in and you add some investment to that and bring in a few more experienced players, then you could actually have something that could compete for the championship. And that's the thing, right? I often say that the best talent developers in the world, that's the that's the clubs that are close to bankruptcy, because then you don't have a choice. You have to play the young players. Like I think it's the generation, the golden generation Southampton created with Gareth Bale and Lallana and Luke Shaw and so on. I mean, why did they develop them? Well, they were almost in administration, so they had to play them. So the same thing was with Midtjylland. They were forced to play those young guys, and then we did what no one expected. We won the championship the first season, and we qualified for Europa League by actually beating Southampton in the last qualification game to get into the group play, and we qualified. We became second after Napoli in the group play, and then we played this game against Man United in the knockout phase, and after 2 months winter break, we shockingly won the first game at home, and unfortunately lost at Old Trafford. But they knocked us out. But that was truly an adventure for the club, and I think something that really put the club on the world map.
So looking at that club. So let's have a look at the first team first, and then we'll go back to the academy because I'm really interested in that as well.
Yeah.
Just obviously you're known quite a lot about associated with using data in football. I mean, I know you guys don't like the term Moneyball, but I mean, just can you tell us what sort of changes did you make at the club with the use of data, and what did you go and what sort of things did you do to change the way the club was being run?
Well, I mean, when I was in school, I hated mathematics. So it was I never felt that was going to be my thing until I met Matt Benham, who's a gambler, and not one of those amateur gamblers that plays a bit every Saturday, but actually a really pro who has basically made his living and made a lot of money on that. And he kind of, speaking to him, he made me realize that some of the brightest guys in football, they don't work for the football clubs. I think they work in the gambling industry, and the way they look at football is very different. So we try to take a lot of that knowledge that he's generated, and not all of that can be applied to a football club, but also a lot of it can actually. So the media always want a simple narrative, so it becomes Brentford and Midtjylland are all about data. There's no human involvement in decisions. But it's not really true. I mean, every process is a combination of objective and subjective information you put together when you make decisions. But it's true that data is a key part of what we're trying to do, and it really comes down to the fact that we both small clubs compared to our competitors, so we can't win by outspending the competition. We have to outthink them, and we used to say that if David has to beat Goliath, then he has to use different weapons, and analytics data is a different weapon.
So can you give us any examples of that? I mean,
one really relevant example right now is that this is something that football people tend to push very, very hard against when you say this, but because football is a very random game. Like, there's a lot more randomness in football than in basketball, for example. And the reason is that football is a low-scoring game, so there's not a lot of full goals in football, and that means that the fewer goals there is in a sport, the more impact random events have, like the ball getting deflected and spins into the net, or the referee making a wrong call in the last minute. And because of that randomness in football, it means that the best team wins less often in football than in for example, a high-scoring sport like basketball. And ultimately, this means that the league table lies. Obviously, that goes against all conventional wisdom in football, because we hear again and again the league table never lies. But this is what a gambler understands. He understands the league table almost always lies. Obviously, it lies more after 10 games than it does after 20 games. But even after a full season, which is like, let's say, 38 games, that's statistically a small sample size. Is not enough to strip out the randomness. So that means that when we evaluate the strength of a team, we don't look at, or when we evaluate how well we are doing, we don't really look at so much at where we are in the league table, but we look at the underlying rating, that we put together, which we think is much more predictive for where we are going than our current league table position. So a couple of specific examples, because this can be easy to say but difficult to manage in reality. So you basically got two, from a management point of view, you got two scenarios that are tricky to deal with. You got a scenario where you get a lot more than you deserve, because we know that just down to randomness, the same performance, your number of points can swing 15 points one way or the other, just down to randomness throughout the season, maybe even more. So sometimes you get more than you deserve, or that your performance is justified. Sometimes you get less than your performance is justified. If you get more, then you are likely to underestimate the need for change. If you get a lot less than you deserve, you're likely to overestimate the need for change. Tonight, Midtjylland is playing one knockout game against another Danish team to see if we get into the Europa League next season. We finished fourth in the table, which to most people looking at it was very disappointing, because we should be able to compete for top three. But our underlying ratings tells us it's as high as it's ever been. We think that we should have, if we hadn't been that unlucky with randomness working against us, then we would have maybe finished second. So we are in a position where everyone else said, well, the league table never lies, so you should sack the coach. Where we are saying, actually, the coach is doing a really good job. And we think that if we can add additions to the team, and if we can, keep building on what we have, we can really, really be good next season. So we use that internal rating as the primary factor to make decisions on whether we're going to drive change or not drive change. That is the primary, the coach knows that this is what he's being measured on, because this is what he can control. And I think we try and make that part of the culture of the club.
So I mean, you say the league table lies. I mean, because of the randomness, it's not really given a true effect of what's happening in the game.
You saw Reading in this season in the Championship. Reading came to the final of the playoffs and almost got to the Premier League. But I think if you ask guys at Reading, they will feel this intuitively as well. But their underlying performance this season by Reading hasn't in very few scenarios they would have got to the playoff. But that's just how randomness works. And I think that's really difficult for people to accept, because the brain is designed to wanting to find patterns. And even when there is no patterns, we want to find patterns, and we want a story. So in Midtjylland, we have a very calm coach who's from a tactical point of view, I think he's bright, but he's calm. And when we're winning, it's because he is so calm, and he can transfer that calmness to the team, and they never panic. And when we lose a game, it's because that he can motivate the team. He's too calm. He's not aggressive enough. And that's why we always fit the story to the outcome, and we always assume that good results always comes from good decisions and good performance. And in a sport or in a discipline like football, where there's so much randomness, that's just not true. But it's something that the majority of people in football just don't want to understand, I think.
So I mean, that brings us along nicely then to the fact that you're going to try and control the things you can control, right? The variables. So I mean, an interesting stat was in that year you won the league that you scored more set pieces than anyone else in Europe, apart from Atletico Madrid. I think you were joint top with those guys.
Yeah.
So I mean, how did that come about? Was that conscious effort, obviously, to focus on that, thinking that this is something we can control in the randomness?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's we believe that set plays was such an opportunity in football. We think so many, like 35% of goals in the Premier League are scored on set pieces, but most teams spend 10 minutes training set pieces a week. Could you imagine a company that spends a very small amount of its time on an activity that generates almost 50% of their revenue? I mean, that wouldn't make sense, but that apparently makes sense in football. So it's a way of trying to look at how's the game played today, where are the inefficiencies, and how can you exploit them. And that led us to really really focus on set plays and strategies. And in American football, that's a player has to learn 200 new set plays every year in his playbook. Why can a football player not learn 10 or 5 maybe? So it's just about trying to put together a system, like trying to maximize the output of those opportunities, and we spend in both clubs. We spend a lot of time on that, and I think in Midtjylland it's been hugely successful. Even this season, it's been hugely successful.
So could you quantify that at all to us? How much actual time do the guys spend on set pieces and doing that set piece homework?
There's lots of different types of set piece training. I mean, there's the theoretical part, learning the system, what do we call different zones, signals. There's basically 3 parts to it. There's the movement in the box, there's the delivery, and then there's the decision on which routine are you going to do for this particular set piece. So there's a training that goes into each of those 3 areas. Sets, delivery. We got a ball striking coach, that works a lot with those guys. We got a set piece coach that comes up with new strategies and teach players the different movement blocks, all these kind of things that makes an effective set piece. And we got what we call a quarterback, like a guy that makes the call on where's the ball going to go, and we kind of try and train him to make the right calls.
So it really is similar to American style sports, isn't it? American football and basketball, when they're calling plays out there on the pitch, and like say they've got a big playbook to go from.
Yeah, very similar. We think there's a lot to be learned from American football.
So you mentioned there the ball striking coach. Can you just tell us a little bit about his role? Obviously, I'm a technical coach. I was quite interested when I read that. Does he work specifically with the set pieces, or does he work with ball striking across the club and the academy?
He works with primarily direct free kicks, so ball striking in relation to that. But he also works with general ball striking, open play strikes, delivery from lateral free kicks and from corners, but primarily direct free kicks. And it was just another way of trying to find an edge, because we felt that, like, if you look at golf, for example, a golf player works with his swing in a lot of detail. But why doesn't a football player work with his swing? I mean, it's kind of taken for granted, but actually there's a lot you can do there to improve. And I think we've mainly been successful with that with our academy in Midtjylland. I mean, we got a couple of guys now that are scoring like 5 or 6 goals every season on direct free kicks, and a lot of it comes down to this training. So it's just another way of trying to come up with something that's different, but also something from a financial perspective that could potentially increase the market value of your players.
And so talking about your academy, then moving on to that. So am I right to believe that you were the first in Denmark to have a proper full academy in Midtjylland? Yeah.
But I mean, back then, 15 years ago, I mean, the youth players were training 3 times a week, and then we came and said, well, why don't we train 7-8 times a week, and build the academy, based on that. And we couldn't really attract the best talent in the first place, so we had to basically recruit whatever we could get. And I remember Klaus Steinlein, who's the director of football now in Midtjylland, he made this he said this target that we started the academy in 2005, and in 2010 we wanted to produce 2 players for the World Cup in South Africa. And he really was hammering that ambition into the organization, and people kind of felt it was impossible at the time. But actually, in the end, we managed to do it. So Winston Reid, who plays in West Ham today, he represented New Zealand at the World Cup, and Simon Kjær, who plays in Fenerbahce, he represented Denmark. So we made that, and obviously created, developed a lot more national team players since then. But yeah, in my opinion, it's a really unique academy, and if there's one thing that makes Midtjylland special is that academy more so than the whole analytic part.
And so tell us a bit about, for instance, Winston Reid. What's his story? How did he end up at the club?
So he was one of the first age group that we recruited, and he was a big. I remember he was a big boy down from southern Denmark. You know, he was big, not super talented, but you know, we felt, you know, partly it was probably the best we could get at that time, but also we felt there was something there. You know, he had his physique was so strong that we felt he might be bigger and more early mature than his mates at the moment, but we also felt that it was probably not just a temporary but a lasting physical advantage that he had. So that was one of the ideas behind recruiting him, and you know, eventually he ended up being very successful, and we sold him to West Ham. Simon Kerr was an interesting one because you know, no one really saw that coming. I mean, I remember when he was 15, we did an exercise. So all the coaches in the academy, including myself, we wrote down, each of us on a piece of paper, the names of the 5 players we thought would be the best 5 years in the future from the academy. And we had 16 players at the time, so we had to pick 5. And then we did that, and we put all the piece of paper into an envelope. And then 5 years later, we opened that envelope again, and no one had Simon among the 5. You know, so it is quite interesting. You know, that, and I think that's a key thing with spotting talent. I mean, no one gets it right all the time. For me, recruitment or spotting talent is not about being right all the time. It's about being less and less wrong, because you will always be wrong.
And so, what age group do you start getting players into the academy? What age?
They're 15, well, they're 15, but obviously there's a pre-academy where, you know, Midtjylland is based there. It's not like London where there's so much competition around the talent. Midtjylland there's also a lot more people in London, but Midtjylland is in an area where the club has kind of dominance because it's the main club. So we can actually have the players stay in their original small clubs for until they're 15 years old, and then we get them in regularly on a weekly basis, train with us, and we monitor their development. And then when they turn 15, we make our picks in terms of who do we think has the potential to make it.
So I mean, we'll move on to this in a minute. Obviously, with your work at Brentford, but what's your thoughts then on like clubs in London or in England who recruit and get players in at 8 years old?
I think it's to some extent they need to do that because there's so much competition. But I don't necessarily think it's the best way of doing talent development. But sometimes the market forces you to do something that is not ideal because of the competitive situation. And I mean, that's the thing. Maybe we'll come back to that. But that was the thing we looked at with Brentford a year ago, and we felt that it was very difficult for us to compete in that market, and we had to do something really different to get an edge.
So let's coming on to Brentford then. Let's address that then. So you had to do something really. I read somewhere as well that's like Ian Carlo going to Man City. That was like almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, almost as if it was the sign to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, I think the compensation rules in English football are heavily in favour of big clubs, and probably designed by big clubs as part of that deal between the Premier League and Football League. But I feel like, you know, what is an academy going to do? An academy has, in my opinion, 2 purposes. It's got to produce first-team players, and it's got to maybe become a profit center. And in Brentford, we didn't manage to do any of that. So we had to look at the academy, and we said, well, actually, when these guys, when we have a good talent, we think can make it, then he turns 17, and we need to sign him on a professional contract. But then the big clubs, the likes of Chelsea and Man City, comes in and offer a lot more money to the player and the agent, and there's nothing we can do, and we get very little compensation, less than we spend on actually developing the player. So it was just a bad business, to be honest, and we had to look at the costs, and we had to look at, how can we be different, and we realized we were never going to compete with the likes of Chelsea and Man City in London, because Man City spends a lot of money, every year just scouting youth players in London, a lot of money, more than our academy costs, I think. So we said, okay, it's like having a business. Let's look at it from that perspective. If you're selling a shampoo and your shampoo is in the supermarket and someone is going to buy that shampoo, it has to be different. So we said, how can we then be different? And we thought a lot about that, and we explored, the options of, we were a Category 2 academy, of going Category 1, going Category 3, going Category 4. But in the end, we felt the best thing was to completely opt out of the system. So what that meant was that we said we don't want to play that games program anymore. We want to do our own games program, and because we think we can put a games program together that's a lot better than playing against Category 2 and Category 3 academies. And we also said that we don't want to run a full academy like from under 8, because we want to be really good at one age group. And we want to run a B team, which is 17 to 20, specialized in that age group, and run that group with a really close link to the first team. And we will run it so you get as close to being a first team as possible. That way, the way we set up the medical department around them. So that was always a very tough decision, because we had to make a lot of the staff redundant. We had to release a lot of players. But we felt for the future of Brentford, that was the right thing to do now. And there's been kind of three keys to the project, because I think it's been a big success the first year. The first thing was to put together a really strong games program. So rather than playing Stevenage and Bolton, this year we played Bayern Munich, Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Valencia, Villarreal. So obviously a really strong games program. Recruitment-wise, we said, okay, how do we recruit when they're 17? I mean, obviously there's less risk recruiting a player when he's 17 than when he's 7. You have a better idea if this guy is going to make it or not. So we looked at the numbers for how many players are released by Category 1 and Premier League Academy every year, and that's a lot. That's a big percentage. So we said, why don't we, instead of fighting against these guys, why don't we try and build good relationships with them, so we can pick up those guys that won't make it in Man City and Chelsea. And then we make a deal where that club has still a part of the upside if it goes well, and then it comes into our B team. Because as you will know, there's a lot of the Jamie Vardy's out there, right? The people who've been rejected, and then there's so many factors that decide whether a player is going to break through or not. And even at age 17, it's tough to tell who's going to make it and who's not. So recruitment, we had we looked at a lot of these what I used to call the rejects from the big clubs, and then we decided to look overseas, because we felt that for the best players in, say, Austria, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, some of those markets, the very best talent there would see Brentford as a pathway to Premier League, and a more effective pathway than actually signing with a Premier League club. Because getting experience in the Championship would be easier to get to Premier League through that way than going through Bundesliga or first team football in Denmark or Sweden or whatever. And then the last part of the strategy was to create a pathway to the first team. And so we made some really clear guidelines for how many training days do our B team players need to have with the first team. How many match days, sitting on the bench, things like that. We made some really clear guidelines for that, and the first team coaching staff kind of have to apply to that. And it's been a success. So we had 4 debuts in the first team last season, and we really managed to create that pathway, which I think is so difficult, because it's a decision that often has to be taken by senior management, because a lot of coaches, we have a really good coach in this respect, but I think a lot of coaches they think so short term that they're not prepared to take the risks of bringing a young player into the team. So.
And so, have you got what are your short term and long term targets for that project? Particularly about talked about 4 players in the team this year. Was that the target, or what's the long term targets for it?
Yeah, well, the long-term target, I think we take it a bit year by year now and try and replicate the success next year with the games program and with the recruitment. But we want to raise the level of the players we recruit. So the target is for sure to get more players into the first team, but also the guys that don't make it to the first team, we will be able to somehow financially capitalize better on them by putting them on loan and outplace them to maybe other markets, other leagues. So there's a few. We look at it as a business because I think an academy is a business, and we, as any other business, you want to try and make it profitable. But like in Midtjylland, we have a more specific target because it's a more well-established academy. So we have a. I basically set 3 targets for the football department in Midtjylland. It's one, we got to qualify for the Europa League group play 3 times before 2020. We have to, secondly, make a profit of X million euros, which I can't give you that exact number, but we got to do that every year. And then the third thing is that 40% of all playing minutes in the first team must be played by academy players. And that's another way of making that choice because it's the DNA of the club, and I don't want any short-term thinking coach to come in and say, "Listen, I'm just gonna, ditch. I don't care about the club's academy. He's got to buy into that, and we want to push ourselves to make those bold decisions about playing those youngsters." Even though you never really know if they're ready before they played 35 games or something like that.
What do you think about the English, English scene at the moment? In terms, we had the conversation a lot of this podcast with people who work within football, talking about the barrier for young players to get opportunities. What do you think? What's your thoughts on the Premier League, the Championship, about the limitations maybe on opportunities for young players, and is that affecting the English game on a bigger scale?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the biggest problem in English football in that respect is the managerial structure, where you have a manager that's responsible for the first team as well as the whole football strategy and transfers. Because you just need to look at the average lifespan of a manager. I think in Premier League or Champions is probably 14 months or something like that. I mean, our head coach in Brentford has been in charge for a bit more than a year and a half now, and he's already one of the longest serving managers in the Championship. But having a structure where the manager is the king, making all these decisions is the wrong thing if you want to have youth development, because especially if a manager knows that if he loses 2 games, he's going to be sacked. What is he going to do? He's going to think about how to win the game on Saturday. But if all key decisions in a football club is made with the time horizon of 1 week, you're never going to move forward. You're never going to give young players a chance. So it comes down to, in my opinion, clubs being strong on the philosophy. Do they really want to do talent development, or do they not want to? And talent development is not putting young players on the bench. And that's why I said in Midtjylland, it's not on the bench. It's 40% of playing minutes must be played by academic players. So you got to make that conscious decision. I think it helps if you have a director of football structure and a head coach, where the head coach is obviously responsible for winning the games, but the director of football is responsible for the mid to long-term strategy of the club. Because otherwise you get a very short-term thinking club, and I don't think that helps this problem.
I suppose the next question would be then, so when do you make the decision to change manager? What's the what would be the last straw there when you make that difficult decision?
When we do that?
Yeah, I mean, you say, because obviously you really want to encourage that long-term thinking, but I mean, obviously there's got to be sometimes you've had to make that decision and change manager or coach.
Yeah. I mean, we've done that as well. And, I mean, it's. I mean, the way I look at it is you got to really know what kind of manager you want and what kind of manager we have a very clearly defined philosophy in terms of style of play, in terms of what we think can be our competitive edges. And first thing is for us, for the head coach to buy into that. We really need to feel that he buys into that for him to be the head coach of us. Because it's not about some ego project for the head coach. It's about being part of that project.
And I'm not saying that is the only way to go, but that is the right way. That's what we have decided in our clubs to go down that route. And many, I often say, and that comes back to our internal ratings. A head coach in Midtjylland or Brentford will not be sacked because of his league table position. But he can be sacked if he doesn't improve the underlying rating, because we know that is a big indication for where we're going, and also, it gives us if we improve that rating, then we will increase the probability for actually, reaching our targets in the table as well. There's a clear correlation there. So it's but coaches has to have a short-term view in some respects. They have to think about how to win the next game. But for me, the most important thing that he buys into the club's philosophy, and then obviously, if you want someone to bring young players through and give young players a chance, then you want to encourage that. But you also need to give the head coach some kind of certainty that if he does that and it doesn't work out with a young player, then you're not going to kick him out right away, because then he will never do it again. So it's just give and take in that respect, I think. So, but you evaluate as I think in my role, my job is always look for who's the right head coach now, and who is the right head coach now might not be the right head coach in 3 years' time, because the club might be in a different state at that time. So I think what got you here won't necessarily get you there, and that also applies for managers.
And so, just tell us a little bit about your style of play then at Brentford. What can you describe it? What the playing philosophy is at the club?
No, when you can have two different approaches to style of play. I think you can say, well, this is how I like football to be played. More like take a romantic view. I love to see this type of football. Or you can look at it more rational and see, well, how is the game actually played, and is there a way you can try and be different, set yourself apart, exploit some of those inefficiencies, and let that define your style of play. So first of all, for us, and that when people come to Griffin Park, that we entertain them. We play attractive football, offensive football. We're one of the most scoring teams in the championship. Unfortunately, we're also one of the teams that concede the most. But secondly, we try and look at, for example, in the championship, I think many teams lack a clear tactical concept. So we try and build that into the team, define how we're going to defend, how we're going to defend when we attack, how do we want to play, how do we want to create compactness, and we have some principles for that, which we think that if we do that right, then there can be an edge in the championship. So we don't have a style of play just to have a style of play. We have a style of play because we think it will help us win more games, and that is an important point. It's not just for the sake of having a style of play. It's actually because we think that if 11 players, if we have not an individual but a systemic approach to the game, if 11 players kind of know what underlying principles that we defend based on, then they can act quicker in the game and therefore have an advantage.
Do you think that you talked about entertaining the fans? Is that something conscious of the fact because they're the paying public, or because obviously the natural thing would be maybe to say maybe not playing such entertaining football would maybe lead to less goals conceded, or something along those lines?
No, we definitely, if we got to have a chance of being in the playoffs or promote next season, we definitely got to improve our defense. So it's not that we don't care about that. We definitely have to improve that. But I think it's people who come to Griffin Park, they come to watch good football, and we think that it's a way for us to be. I think we're one of the best footballing teams in the championship. Possession team. We creative. We got a lot of technically strong players, a lot of energy we play with, and that's how we want to be different. And I think that's the question. Any team is gonna, you gotta find something that you are better than at the opponent, no matter who the opponent is.
Because I'm thinking of someone like Mourinho at United, obviously, who's at Chelsea when I was there. He very much, plays a certain way, which he's had a lot of success with, and I think that's because he's obsessive about controlling the variables. That's his thing. So it's not necessarily that aesthetically pleasing. Maybe for what United, for instance, are usually are used to seeing. So that's why I thought about you when you were talking about controlling those variables. How come you didn't go down that route? Maybe with some of your playing philosophy.
Sorry, what do you mean by controlling the variables?
Well, what I'm saying is that Mourinho's famous for being obsessive about trying to control everything within the game he can, and that's maybe why he doesn't play such attractive football as some other coaches. He's all about controlling the variables, right? So I mean, that's why I said,
but I think you can do that offensively as well. I don't think sometimes controlling the variables is associated with defensive football and having a strong defensive organization and things like that. But I think the concept of having an attacking organization as well and controlling the variables in that part of the game as well, I think is something you can do. I mean, and I think it's something that is necessary to do in a game that's very fluid like football, and in many respects very 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 random. I mean, it's to try and reduce the complexity. That's why I think you have a style of play. You want to try and reduce the complexity of the game and be less vulnerable to randomness.
And so another one of those randomness. Is it right saying you had like a throw-in coach at Brentford to work on specifically on the throw-ins and that area?
Yeah, it's another. I mean, the conversion rate of long throws is actually quite a lot higher than the conversion rate of corners, and we think that's another way, but not just long throws, but also having a system for short throw-ins and knowing what to do, and it's just rather than just that being something that just happens and we just try and keep the ball. Having a strategy for that is definitely a way of trying to control the variables.
And also speaking about the first team, I read somewhere as well that you have a player app where the players can register how they're feeling at the time and what sort of condition they are. Is that true? And then what do you do with that data? There is different. We use different types of testing when players come in the morning to see what's their readiness to train. It's something that's done by the strength and conditioning and the medical department. We try and work with sleep as well. We got a sleep coach, and we think if we can get players to sleep more and sleep better, there's an advantage there. So we try and help the players, give them tools to not only monitor but also improve their sleep patterns. It's something I thought a lot about actually when I did my research for the goldmine effect, and I was in Kenya and Ethiopia to study the middle and long distance runners, and I was just really blown away by the simplicity of their lifestyle. So they sleep, they eat, they train, and then they sleep, they eat, they train again. And all their life were kind of focused on becoming top athletes. And I call it they were really truly 24/7 professional athletes. And I think there's a lot that football players can learn from individual athletes in that respect. Because an individual athlete is going to take care of himself in a completely different and more detailed way than a football player. And I think that's a cultural thing in football as well. And I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think football players train enough either. I mean, I think if there's another big jump to be taken on the physical side in football if you get players to train more. So you're talking at first team level or young?
Yeah, first team level. Generally, first team level. I mean, training doesn't have to be. I think that's something I realized in coming to England. There's a cultural difference that a lot of English players tend to see training. They don't feel they trained unless there's been a high intensity training, and and where I think, overseas there's a bigger tradition for slower tactical training, which can be very, which can have a lot of impact as well if you do that right. But and it doesn't have to be physical demanding. And I think, for example, technology coming into football, virtual reality, things like that, that allows players to train more without big physical demands.
So yeah, coming on to your book, The Goldmine Effect. So you talked about the Kenyan athletes you spent time with. I mean, Jimmy, you talked about the importance of role models there, and actually that maybe that it's maybe this wasn't God-given talent there, but actually it was something which was maybe developed in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about. I think it's a lot about culture. I used to say, like, people ask me, well, what if? Why do we don't have a Usain Bolt in the UK? Why we don't have the genes or something like that. That's what they say. And I said, well, actually, there's a Usain Bolt in the UK. He's just not a sprinter. He's a football player. And if Usain Bolt were born in the US, he would never have been a sprinter. He'd been a wide receiver in American football, maybe a basketball player. So what does that culture lead you to do? And actually, the best sprinter, I think he's called Gemili in the UK. Is his last name. He used to be he was a reject at the Chelsea Academy. So, what leads people to do in Kenya and Ethiopia, you become a farmer or you become a long distance runner. That's it. That's the two most prominent career paths you can have.
And how?
And so it just becomes second nature for people to run.
And so how much role does genetics play in that, though? I mean, do they have?
I think it's the axis. Genetics is important. I think it's genetics genetics means less in more complex sports than it does in very simple sports. Because in a complex, genetics means more in sprinting than it does in football, for example. Sprinting is a very simple sport. You got to move from A to B as quickly as possible. If you don't have a lot of fast twitch muscle fibers naturally, you will never become a top sprinter. Whereas in football, you may be not that quick physically, but if your decision making is good, then you can make up for it. And you can play in a team that doesn't maybe defend with a low block, and therefore, for example, as a defender, you don't need that much pace. So because there's a bit more complexity, then you can compensate. But you can't do that in really simple sports. But generally speaking, the way I look at it is that genetics is the access ticket to the game, but it's not the decisive factor. So if you don't have enough transverse muscle fibers, you will never become a top world-class sprinter. But because you have a lot of transverse muscle fiber, doesn't mean you will become a top sprinter either. But it's the access ticket to the game. It gives you the opportunity. It opens the door for you. But then all these other things, commitment and training and good coaching and all that comes on top.
And moving us on to talent ID, because just tell us a little bit more about your performance and potential axis and looking at trying to identify talent and the different forms of talent.
A lot of people tend to focus only on performance and overlook potential, and I can understand that because performance is visible, it's what you see, whereas potential is something you might see in the future. So, but it's important for anyone, whether you work in sports or business, to try and identify some of those potential indicators. And one of the examples I used to give is the importance of looking into to context around performance to be able to spot potential. So imagine you have two sprinters and one is running 10.6 on the 100 meter and one running 10.2. Then most people would pick the 10.2 guy because he's the fastest and they assume therefore the most talented guy. But actually, what if the 10.2 guy had the best coaches, the best training environments, the early developed, physically developed, whereas the 10.6 guy, he trained on his own, never in a structured way at all. So when you understand that piece of context, then maybe a raw 10.6 can be better than a trained 10.2. And I think that applies to all kinds of fields. It applies to, football, understanding the environment that has brought that player to be what he is today, versus another player. It's key to be able to spot potential. In business, I sometimes ask business people, like, all right, if you're gonna hire a salesperson, would you take the guy from Apple or the guy from Microsoft? And people tend to go for the Apple guy because he works for the most successful company and has the best results. But we also need to remember he's selling a product people are willing to lie and sleep in the street for just to get into the shop to buy. So maybe when you understand that piece of context, that good result in Apple indicate less potential maybe than an okay result for a salesperson in Microsoft. So having contextual intelligence is key.
And so just tell us a little bit about the whispering talent and shouting talent, and your thoughts on that, and also about and then the late starters.
Yeah. Well, the late starters, or what some people call the late bloomers. It's obviously people who haven't been that good early on, but they come a bit from behind. And I think it's back to when I described my own footballing career, that if you've been too good too early, then you don't have to reflect on how you can get better. You just think, oh well, I'm super talented, so why should I work hard? Why should I worry about getting better? You get what some people would call a fixed mindset. Whereas if you come from behind, if you wasn't that good early on, then you have to basically think about how you can improve. You need to work harder than everybody else, and in the end, then you develop a growth mindset, and probably that's a better predictor for future potential than raw talent is.
And as you talked about Ronaldo and Michael Jordan, those guys being, they really, the Brazilian Ronaldo, who you said that they wouldn't pay for his bus ticket as academy, and then a few years down the line, he's one of the best players in the world. So the fact that the desire and that made them want it more, that pushed them over the edge to make them a performer later on.
Yeah. I think definitely that desire to deal with the way you learn and deal with adversity, overcoming obstacles. That's probably the real talent. That's the real talent.
I suppose we're relating that back to football. I suppose that's the problem, isn't it? We talked about earlier about the early talent ID, and then the issues around that, and then about late bloomers. I mean, because when you talk about the shouting talent, someone like Messi, who's when he's young, he's obviously one of the best, and then players like Vardy who come down later on down the line. So as a footballing culture, how do we confront problems with that, and what sort of things can we do to resolve those problems?
And I think it's developing a better understanding of what potential look like, and I accept that's very difficult. It's because it's complex to see who will make it, who will not make it. But I also think there's an argument for not making final decisions about people too early. You can go down a route as a talent developer where you say I want few players but dedicate a lot of attention to them to develop them, or you can go down a route which I tend to believe more in, if it's possible for clubs and countries, which is the more players for as long as possible. You want to have as many as players and keep them in the loop for as long as possible, because it's very difficult to say how they're going to develop. So making definitive decisions about players too early is tricky. Also because those decisions often turn into self-fulfilling prophecies.
I suppose it's difficult, like say in England, every club wants that big base, but with the ultra competitiveness and saturation of the market, if you like, of the academy system, makes it very difficult. I know clubs in France who they have their own towns, have huge hundreds and hundreds of players in their base because, like you say, they have no one coming in to pick it. So I mean, what could we do in England, just in London, in that environment, as you know, to resolve that sort of problem, where to try and confront the issues with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I got the exact answer. I think, as I said earlier, sometimes the market you're in forces you to do things in a different way, and which may not be the ideal way, but you just have to accept those market forces. And I guess that's probably, I don't know, if I was running an academy from under 8s, or it's not completely clear to me actually what I would do.
And talking about the performance environment, talk us a little bit about that. So you talk about when you visited the Jamaican sprinters, and obviously the modest surroundings they're in that world-class environment. Just tell us about the importance or the unimportance of facilities in world-class development.
Well, I remember I came out to the training facility, BP Track and Field Club in Kingston, and I expected to be obviously a top modern training facility because the best athletes in the world train there. But all I saw was this grass track and then a gym with rusty weights. And I asked the head coach there, Stephen Francis, why he was not building a proper facility, and he said because he wants to show people that the road to success is long and uncomfortable. He thinks that all you need is there to become a world-class sprinter, but there also has to be someone that tests these sprinters to see how much they really care. There has to be an obstacle, a choice they have to make of, do I want to be comfortable or do I want to get better? And I think it's a really intelligent idea, to be honest, and something I really key lesson I took away from my visit there. But I think any company, any club should decide what's right for them, because there's in my opinion two ends of the scale. There's the guys like Francis that says, keep facilities Spartan and simple because they you want to test people's drive, how much do they really care. And then you got the other end of the spectrum, which might be like some of the top football academies in the UK, where you say, well, we have these amazing training facilities. We create a no-excuse environment. We give you everything, food, we get you transport to training, we sort that out for you, but then there's no excuses for performing. And any club, any organization have to choose what's right for them. When we talk about talent development, I'm not in favor of a no-excuse environment because I think it tends to have the opposite effect. It tends to signal to people that you already arrived. And that's the last feeling you want a young player to feel, that I have already arrived. So I think a world-class facility is for world-class athletes, it's not for a rookie.
Interesting. Okay, I know you're very busy. Just finally, Rasmus, any advice you'd give for a young aspiring coach who wants to reach the top level in the game?
Yeah, I think one of the questions I think sometimes anyone who want to pursue a top, have a top position in his career, the question they sometimes ask themselves is, how can I, as quickly as possible, get this position, whatever that may be. And I think that's the wrong question. I see that a lot. I think the question is, what are the experiences that I need to get as a coach to become a top coach, to be good enough to have a chance to become a top coach and get that position? That's the question you got to ask yourself, because then it's a growth mindset that drives that. Myself, I never had a career plan. I don't have a career plan. I don't have any ambition about, having a top job in a much bigger club than I work with now. But I just feel passionate for the content of the job and the project and the people I work with, and I feel I learn a lot. And I think, it's probably, I don't like career plans, to be honest. I think it takes you out of the present moment, and it kind of leads you to think, I'm going to have this job because when I get that, then I can get that job, and so on. And then you never really perform in the present moment.
And finally, what about a young aspiring player who wants to, on the beginning of this road to this aspirational, getting to the top?
I think as a player, you need to ask yourself if you really want to pay the price, because there's a price to be paid, and you need to make a conscious choice about what it takes, and also what that means for what you can do. And I think once you make that decision in your mind, you can get it. You can get there. Very few players, even at the top level, very few players have made that decision fully.
Rasmus Ankersen, appreciate your time. Thanks very much. It's been fantastic.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hi guys, Saul here. I just want to quickly just give you a little bit of a heads up. I forgot to ask Rasmus there about where you guys could find out more about him. I just need to give him a couple of plugs because he's got a couple of excellent books, both based around talent ID, which obviously in football is really interesting. So lots of transferable work there. 2 books called Hunger in Paradise and The Goldmine Effect. Both books I've read and they're really good, and then these inspired me to contact him. So check them out. They're definitely worthwhile, and I really hope you enjoyed that show.
Thanks for tuning in to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Dynamic Ball Mastery Program is the world's leading online individual technical training program, proven and developed at the highest level in the English Premier League. Sign up now to train like the pros and take your game to the next level. Master the ball, master the game.